Infertility, in-laws, and same-sex attraction. Let's talk about it. Welcome to The Pursuit, a Cross Point City Church podcast that pursues a deeper dive into the scripture from last week's sermon. I'm Carlos Fernandez, and I'm here with our lead pastor, James Griffin.
Your lead pastor.
Our lead pastor, your lead pastor. You know, same thing.
It's all good, man.
Yeah.
It works.
What's up, man?
You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Glad to be back.
Yeah, missed a week.
I know.
Doing stuff with the family.
Yeah, it was all good. It was
Love
all
that.
good. Just had a doctor's appointment, so
That's good, man.
All good news, right?
Good,
So
good.
that's solid. But dude, we had a solid week. I know I wasn't here last week, man. I got to tell you, bro, that first sermon, I already told you, it was probably one of the best sermons you've ever preached. I think that you taught us well. And you were kind. I mean, it was just so many points of it that I was sitting there. I was like, man, I'm proud of you. It was that good. And this week has been amazing.
Words, man. Yeah.
But before we go into what we talked about,
Yeah.
let's just talk about this thing that we kind of shouted out in the beginning of the gathering, man. It was about men's conference.
That's right.
And
The Act Like Men's Conference is coming up. Yeah, it's crazy. We've done pre-registration for the last 2 weeks with all of our guys who have been involved in our men's discipleship efforts. This past weekend, we announced that registration was open. We made it public to everyone. And I was on our guys, like, you better sign up quick. It's going to sell out. If you mess around, you're going to miss out. And it sold out in less than a day. So I just want to say to all the people who are listening, all the dudes who are listening, if you didn't get a ticket, I'm so sorry. The conference is sold out. So that's the bad news. The good news is we are going to provide a digital pass option.
Yeah.
We're working on getting that ready right now. And so in the very near future, you'll be able to go on and you can buy a digital pass. We'll send you a link with a login code so that over the course of that weekend, man, you can log in, get some guys together at your house, man, cook some barbecue, play some games, just have a dude's night, dude's morning, and you guys can join us for the conference online. So there will still be a way for men to participate, but unfortunately, it just won't be here on campus. So, so we're already looking at next year. Carlos, I'm not going to leak who we're bringing in next year, but we got a solid lineup of speakers coming next year.
Nice.
We're working on somebody to lead worship, and what we know is that we're going to need a bigger boat for next year. So we're most likely going off-site. We're going to try to find a bigger location so we can host more men. Yeah. Great problem. Yeah. But it's going to be insane.
I just want everybody to know that I know who's coming. And no, I can't tell you. Maybe.
That's right. That's right.
Take me out of coffee. I just
be a part of men's conference, either in person or not. We're going to tell everybody about next year.
Hey, that is true. Everybody will know in June.
This weekend. So so it's coming.
Yeah, no, but I'm excited, man. I think it's so cool that we're getting to do stuff like this. Like this is going to be big. I think it's going to impact a lot of people, and I really think it's just going to change a lot of lives.
100%.
So I'm excited.
It's good, man.
So, all right. So let's talk about this weekend.
All right.
Okay. Let's talk about the sermon, man. You talked about a lot of stuff, and then you told people that we're going to specifically hit some things. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I guess just give us a little recap, a little bit about that, or you just want to go straight into the topics?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can speak to the preface, I mean, the whole sermon was on family. Yeah. And I know we're going to talk a lot about questions concerning the family today. We're going to dig just a little deeper, but, as I was writing this sermon, I was hoping to get to some questions that I knew people would be asking in light of what I taught. Mm-hmm. And as I wrote the sermon, I'm like, there's no way. Like, I do not have time for the questions.
It's a lot.
But in all honesty, what I taught in the sermon is the ideal for family. Mm-hmm. What is God's ideal for a husband and wife and a parent and a child? And how did he set the family up to work in the beginning when he instituted the family? And for what purpose does the family even exist? So, again, I was speaking about the ideal, but the reality is sin impacts families. Mm-hmm. In Genesis 3, sin, it entered the world. All the consequences of sin entered the world. And because sin is with us and because we all possess sin natures, what happens to families at times is that they're broken. Family relationships struggle. Husbands and wives encounter certain things in marriage, and parents and kids encounter certain things in those familial relationships. And it creates issues and family dynamics change. And so again, what I know to be true is that people who were here or listening online, they probably heard the sermon and they're like, my family doesn't look like that. And my marriage doesn't look like that. And my relationship with my kids don't look like that. Or my relationship with my parents don't look like that. So what does all this mean for me?
Yeah.
And this is really what I want to get into on the podcast today. Some of those questions.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about family abandonment. That's one of the things that you wanted to chop up.
Yeah,
So
that's right. Well, I know this is a big thing, man. And Carlos, you know, like I know we have people in our church. This is their story, right?
Yeah.
And when I think about family abandonment, we'll talk about death and divorce in just a moment. So how does death or divorce and that form of abandonment impact a marriage and kids? But I'm thinking more of like what happens when family members walk out on family members.
Yeah.
And specifically what happens when parents abdicate responsibilities and kids are impacted. I was talking to my wife earlier today about this because this is her story. And so I'm married to a woman who was abandoned by family members who were meant to provide for her and care for her and educate her and leave a spiritual inheritance for her. And it didn't happen, you know? My wife was born to a teenage mom. She never knew her dad. Her dad bailed when she was a baby. She's never had a relationship with him. In addition, my mother-in-law's just had a lot of challenges over the course of her life, just challenges with addiction. And so sadly, she was never able to be the parent to my wife or her brothers that she needed to be.
Yeah.
And so because of those forms of abandonment and neglect, what happened is that other family members had to fill in the gaps for my wife and her brothers. So, for example, when my wife was in middle school, she was taken in by her grandparents. And from middle school on, she was raised by her grandmother and her grandfather. Her aunts and uncles became more like brother and sister figures. And so what my wife didn't get from her own family, she had to get from extended family. And I think a lot of times when family members abandon family members in this way, this is ultimately what happens, is that you have other family members who have to step in. It's grandparents, it's aunts, it's uncles, it's cousins, and they have to fill the gaps for members in the family that aren't getting what they're supposed to get from the people directly responsible for their care, okay? So that's one aspect of it. But man, I was also thinking about how the church is meant to fill in gaps for people. We're going to talk about it this upcoming weekend, but you know, I'm going to preach on the church, and the dominant metaphor for the church in the New Testament is family. It's called the household of faith, you know, and there's a lot of mother, father, brother, sister language concerning the church. And I mean, I grew up in the Baptist church, man. That's how we talked. It was always brother so-and-so, sister. So, you know, it was
Brother
kinda,
James,
it was kind of weird,
doing?
but, you know, it's biblical.
Yeah.
So the church in the New Testament, again, is a family. And I think when people are abandoned by family members, the church has this incredible opportunity to step up and to provide for people what they're not getting from people they are directly related to. And I do think this is the beauty of the church. In reality, some of us who are listening today are closer to our spiritual family than we are our biological families.
Yeah.
Right? It's like those relationships run much deeper. Our spiritual mothers and fathers, they're better parents to us than our actual mothers and fathers. Our spiritual brothers and sisters, man, we're closer to them than we are our actual brothers and sisters. And this, again, is the beauty of the church. It's this thing that God has invited us into, which I think at times can and does fill the gaps for people who have been abandoned.
Yeah.
So if you think about what the church does, I mean, it can at times provide for its members, and it needs to. That the church, when education isn't happening on the level it needs to happen at from the parents, and sadly, we'll talk more about this, the parents are meant to be the primary educators of kids. When that's not happening in the way it needs to happen, the church can fill that gap if needed.
Yeah.
In regards to the spiritual inheritance, the same is true. You know, when a family fails to give a kid the spiritual inheritance that the kid needs, the family can provide that.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of gaps that can be filled by the people of God.
Yeah.
But it can also be filled by God himself. I know you were mentioning something about that right before we jumped on here, man. We were talking about that.
Yeah,
right?
no. Psalm 27:10, it says, "For my father and mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me in." And it just shows that regardless of what people do, because people are going to fail you, God won't. You know,
That's
he's
right.
going to be committed to you. And it's crazy that was my story. My dad left when I was very young.
Yep.
And I would always tell people I never felt his absence.
Yeah.
Because my family was really, really good. My cousins, my uncles, I literally called my uncle dad.
Yep.
And through that, and through the church, just showing me, man, grace, forgiveness, love, and mercy. When I went to go back, get a relationship with my dad, I was able to forgive him and love him where he was at because the church trained me up on how to be a good son, regardless of how my dad was.
That's right.
You know, so it was just, so many people. And just shout out to the aunts and uncles and the grandfathers and grandmothers that are just doing an amazing job right now, taking in those kids, because I know it's a lot of hard work. And the last thing you'd be thinking at 65 that you're going to take somebody's kid in. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And man, just shout out to y'all because my grandma, she moved in with my mom during that time. And she provided that. She was the help that my mom needed. And I love my grandma. I mean, there's so many people that are just amazing. So thank you guys for being faithful.
Mad respect for all those people
Yeah.
in families that are doing what other people haven't done.
Yeah.
And I think God is incredibly pleased with you. We commend you. And I would also say, man, if there's somebody out there that just needs family because you're not getting that from other family members, the church is your family, and you got to connect and you got to plug in, okay? So it's huge. It's huge, all right? Yeah. Let me talk about death and divorce.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, this could be seen as another form of abandonment, if we want to call it that. But when I think about spouses or single parents or widows or whatever, fatherless children, all the things that would fit into this category, this, again, is where I would point to the church as the family that is needed and necessary, okay? So I was just thinking about what the Bible says about widow care, all right? So let's say a woman loses a husband to death, okay? And we've got many stories of that within our own church, sadly. But what the Bible teaches specifically is that if a widow has family members that can care for her, those family members need to take her in and care for her. But in the event that a widow does not have that the church needs to go to bat for her. That the church needs to concern itself with widows that don't have family members who can care for her. So it's got to kind of be this collective effort, if you will. The church has to be willing to partner with families in this way to fill in gaps for women who have lost husbands. You know, I would say, too, the same is true when a divorce occurs and a spouse abandons a spouse. Whether it's a husband leaving a wife or a wife leaving a husband, you know, it might be that you have spiritual mothers and fathers or spiritual grandfathers or grandmothers picking up the slack in that regard. And maybe they're showing up and helping out with some things in the home, or maybe they're helping in certain ways with some child rearing purposes. You know, I think of ministries. I got buddies who are involved in ministries, and they are specifically serving single mothers who have sons. This is beautiful, man. And what these guys are doing is they're taking in the sons of single moms, and they're taking them hunting and fishing, and they're doing outdoor stuff, and they're just showing these young men what godly men look like. And they're spending time and investing relationally and investing spiritually. And it's all a collective effort on the church's part to really shape young men into who they need to be. One of the things that I love, Carlos, that we do as a church to help out with some of the stuff that I'm talking about, we have ministries like Grief Share, where you've got family members who are losing family members, whether it's children or spouses or whatever it may be. And we've got a place here where people can come and be ministered to and be served. And they can experience healing through that grief and that pain and that loss. We also have a ministry here at Cross Point called Divorce Care. And what we're trying to do as a church is to serve people who are being abandoned by spouses, to serve families who are being abandoned by spouses. So I do feel that it is the church's job to enter into the pain of people when certain sin occurs or the consequence of sin is felt, so that we can help people along in the life that God has for them. And so the church, again, has to serve the purpose of family when family isn't there in certain ways.
Yeah. No, that's good. I was also going to say, shout out to Mark and Jenny, right? Ostad, they're the ones that lead Grief Share. Man, they're doing amazing. But then also in our class, our institute, we're doing classes on marriages too, so that we can train people up to, hey, this is how you do it too. Just because we don't want to be always on the tail end trying to help with that stuff. But we know that sometimes that just happens.
Right,
that's what it's going to be. But you talked about something else, that this is a little bit heavier topic.
Okay.
And so families that are impacted by infertility.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because this, I already know that people don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah.
Well, and this question always comes up when we go back to Genesis chapter 1 and we talk about the procreational purpose of marriage. That husbands and wives have been called by God to be fruitful, to multiply, to have babies. So every time we talk about it, and I just, man, I'm always aware that there are married couples in our church that have struggled with this, that are asking the question, well, what about us?
Yeah.
Like we want to be able to do that, but we can't. There are things going on medically, physically, that are preventing us from having a baby. And the first thing that I would say we just have to be aware of is that infertility, I believe, is a consequence of the fall that we see in Genesis chapter 3. That when sin entered the world, it corrupted creation, that it broke God's perfect world. And part of that impact, it affects bodies, physical bodies. And it's why things like disease are present in the world. It's why people die. It's why people get sick. But it's also why men and women at times are affected by infertility. It is a consequence of sin, that sin has disrupted God's perfect design, okay? But I believe God can redeem it. And this is the beauty of what we're getting ready to talk about, is that the story of a family doesn't have to be infertility. Like for the husband and wife that wants to have children, that for some medical reason cannot have children, I don't believe that has to be the story of the family. You know, I was just thinking about some of our efforts these days, Carlos, as a church around foster care and even adoption. And it's just been a burden on my heart for a while now to get our church more involved in these spaces. Because what I know is that right here in our immediate communities in Northwest Georgia, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of children who are not experiencing family in the way God designed family to work. These kids have been abandoned, they're being neglected, they're being abused, their parents are addicted to substances, and these kids are not getting what they're meant to get from families. And so they've either been left and they're waiting to be adopted, or they've been taken by defects and they're waiting to be fostered. And so I just want to say, man, I think to the family who is struggling with infertility, this is a beautiful opportunity for you to put the heart of God on display by potentially taking a child in. And it's something obviously that you need to be very prayerful about. Like I'm not pressuring anybody to do this. Be prayerful about it, talk about it. If you need to talk to a pastor about it, we'd love to talk to you about it. But Carlos, here's the reality of the gospel, okay? That when we were lost, dead in our sins, enemies of God, and without a family, right? That God pursued us and he chased us down, and he not only justified us, right? Made the necessary payment for our sin through his son, Jesus Christ, so that our sins might be forgiven, past, present, and future. God declares over our lives we're not guilty anymore. He not only justified us, but God adopted us. That the Son of God became a man so that men and women could become sons and daughters of God. This is beautiful, right?
Amazing.
And so that God is a loving Father who has adopted us into his family as his children, and now we get to share in all the benefits and all of the blessings as members of the family of God, the household of God. And so when I say this doesn't have to be your story, but God can redeem it, this is what I mean. Like what the enemy meant for evil, God can use for good. Like think about it. To the family being impacted by infertility, you can fill in the gap for a child who needs a family. you can do for a little boy or girl what God has done for you. And you can reach out and pursue and take in and put a name on them and give them all the blessings and benefits of being a part of your family. And in doing that, you are reflecting the very character and nature of God, what he's done to save sinners and to bring them into his family. And so I would just encourage you, be prayerful.
Yeah.
Be prayerful. Man, how unbelievable that we, as we live in God's broken world, that we have opportunities like that to put him on display and to be a blessing to other children who might not ever know what true family is supposed to be like. And in that way, our families can still serve their image-bearing purpose as we raise kids and, do it in the way that God intended it to work. So be prayerful about that.
Yeah, no, I love it. What I'm hearing you say, that if you're struggling with infertility, that your marriage still holds purpose and can bring God glory.
100%.
Like it could still do that. You just have to lean in a little bit. And also for the single person who wants to be married and who wants all those things, like God can still use you in your singleness. You can still bring God glory regardless of where you're at. And that's what I keep hearing. You know, sin has damaged some things, but you can still be used by God in such an incredible way. And so just to give somebody hope, because I know when people hear that, they're just like, man, that's not me. That can't be me. But what you're saying is like, no, God can still use you in mighty ways to change generations.
I would say that the story of your family doesn't have to be the end of the story. So no matter where you are, no matter what you've experienced, no matter what you've lived through, the story of your family doesn't have to be the end of the story. Like God can use you to rewrite a new story. Your marriage can be different. Your parenting can be different. The infertility doesn't have to stop you from fulfilling the role that God has given you a family and all of those relationships to fulfill. No matter where you find yourself, like God can redeem what you've been through or what you are presently experiencing to serve his purposes and to put himself on display through those family relationships. So don't be discouraged. Just keep pressing in, keep looking forward. He's awesome. Got it.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about then the role of the family.
All right.
I know you've been explaining like what the role is throughout this whole entire thing, like the role of the individual, the family. We're going to talk about the church, the state. And so let's just talk about what are we supposed to do as the family members.
All right. So where you want to start, man? Education?
Yeah, I think education's a big one. So let's go ahead and let's start with that one.
All right. So I think we'll start. Like, what does it mean to be the primary educator of your kids, right? As I was constructing the sermon this past week, I really wanted to try to give parents perspective on this because I think the temptation is to be very passive in our approach to educating children as parents. Yeah. Right. And the mistake.
Well, we've been trained to do that.
100%, man.
I'm not going to lie. This is the first time. Now, I don't know if it's the first time I heard it, but this is the first time I've ever heard somebody boldly talk about it this way. It's supposed to be our responsibility as 100%. Parents. 100%.
Well, I think the temptation in a society like ours as well is, no, we just give them to the school or we send them to the church and they do that work. And then they come home and, whatever. We just do the parenting stuff here. But education, that belongs to someone else. But it doesn't. It doesn't. According to the Word of God, the parent is the primary educator of the child. And the school and the church are supplemental in that regards. Or in that regard, excuse me. So I think when we forget that or we don't have the right perspective and we become passive as parents, what happens is that the school disciples our kid, social media disciples our kid, and they come home and over time we're like, what's happening to my kid? Well, you gave them to the government and you gave them to their phone and that has shaped who they are and how they see the world, and you have not invested in them in the way that parents are supposed to invest in their kids. Very, very problematic, okay? And so it starts with a right perspective. Your job as a mom or dad is to work each and every day to shape the way that your child sees the world. To really shape them into the person who lives in the world as an image bearer of God. It's your responsibility. And if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you, right? And And the truth is, man, the parent has the child over the course of thousands of hours in their lifetime. And so if the parent's not doing it, man, and they're just offloading it and putting that responsibility onto other people or other institutions, that kid ain't going to grow into the person that they need to be. So parents, you are the primary educators of your kids, all right? Now, I talked over the weekend just about some practicalities of that I think might be worth repeating.
Yeah.
What this ultimately means is that the jurisdiction of education belongs to you. What I mean by that is that it is your God-given right to dictate what your child is learning. And the problem I think that we're facing in our society today is that we have state-run schools who are exercising such control over education that the government has overstepped its jurisdiction and now thinks it has the right to dictate what children are learning when it doesn't. Okay? Very problematic.
Yeah.
So again, in a lot of schools, you have all of these crazy ideologies, these demonic ideologies like humanism. I've been talking about that a lot, being pushed on kids, and it is changing the way that our kids see the world. And you have teachers acting like they have every right to do it, and then you have passive parents who think they can't do anything about it. And I'm just saying, all the parents, you can do something about it, and you should. When you truly understand what the Word of God has to teach on how these institutions work together, the family and the state has no right to dictate to the family what children should be educated in. And so if a public school steps outside of its jurisdiction, you should go to the school. And you should talk to the teacher or talk to the principal, or you should go to the school board meeting and you should raise your hand as a parent and say, I do not consent. I'm not okay with you teaching that to my child. That is your God-given right. And if you do not take that step to wave your hand and to speak up, that's on you, right? But you have every right to do that, because when the state oversteps its jurisdiction, it needs to be called out. And it needs to be put back in its place, all right? And so if that's happening, if that's your experience, you got to do something about it. You know, one of the questions, too, that I've been asked is like, what about homeschooling?
Yeah.
Should we homeschool? And I would say, I don't know, maybe. I don't know.
I'm going to say that.
I
don't know.
I don't know. I mean, if that's something that you feel you need to do it.
Yeah.
And the reality is, based on where you live and where you're listening from, you may need to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, man, I got some buddies living in parts of the country right now where things have gotten so crazy. And if I was where they were, it'd be like a note, like, yeah, man, go ahead and pull them out. But again, as a parent, that is your God-given right. If you want to bring your kid home and educate your kid, it is your right to do that. You know, I talked a little bit over the weekend about how the whole idea of government running education, it's only been happening for a little over 100 years in the United States.
Yeah.
Like it's all started in the 19th century with a guy named Horace Mann. He set in motion this movement to standardize education. And then in the earliest 20th century, families in the United States gave it over to the government. And the government has continued to exercise more and more control. But I would just say to parents who are struggling with this, you need to seek wisdom, and you need to pray, and you need to discuss. And if the right thing for your family is to bring your kid home and to educate your kid within the home, then do it. I mean, this is what my family's doing right now. And I never thought that we would be the family doing it, but when the pandemic forced schools to shut down and everybody came home, and then my daughter was born and she had the heart defect and all of these health issues, like in a very pragmatic sense, it was like, hey, this just works for our family right now. And then the longer we've done it, we're like, hey, there are a lot of benefits to this, because my girls are in the Word every day. We're training them in the Scriptures. We're shaping them according to a Christian worldview. Like, they're not in a classroom for hours on end. They could be kids. There's a lot of flexibility with it. So there's been a lot of benefits for our family to this. But I would say to the mom or dad struggling, like, you need to take all factors into consideration. And I'll even say this, all right, if education in our society continues to decline, you very well may need to do this for your child's good and for your family's good. But if you're going to leave your kid where they are, just know it is within your God-given jurisdiction to dictate what your kid is learning. So whatever you need to do to make sure they're learning the right things, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is if you are going to leave your child in that space for education, make sure you disciple your kid.
100%.
You know, discipleship starts at home. Like, I think like you said it earlier, we keep handing off things to people and saying, hey, you do that. The church's job is not to disciple your kid. It's your job.
Yeah.
You know, the church's job, it's supposed to disciple and it's supposed to evangelize, supposed to train up people. But you specifically at home need to teach your kids how to pray.
That's right.
How to read the Bible. You need to teach them about Jesus, teach them the gospel. You need to stop trying to hand that off. You think one weekend or week, Wednesday night for 2 hours, you think that's going to be it? Come
enough.
on, y'all.
Not enough. Right.
And that's why they're going into schools. And guess what? The devil's not waiting.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
The devil's not waiting to talk to them about these big topics. You know, he's going to try to expose them to so many things at the earliest age he can.
Yep.
And we're over here like, oh, they're innocent. No, we got to match what the enemy's doing. We have to be discipling our kids, teaching them about truth because they're going to be learning things from so many different sources, man. And it's crazy.
Yeah. Well,
it's crazy.
Well, we either disciple them in the word or they will be discipled by the world.
Yeah.
And discipleship in the word, to your point, starts at home.
Yes.
And if it's not happening at home, then what's happening at the church is not going to be enough. Again, to the point I made earlier, the church is supplemental in regards to educating children in the instruction and discipline of the Lord. But the primary role of the parent is that, to bring your children up in the instruction and discipline of the Lord, to teach them that God is sovereign over all things, that he determines truth, that they will flourish when they live according to his truth, and in the end, they will be accountable to him. And then you teach them how to live each and every day under the lordship of Jesus Christ by giving them instruction and modeling it for them as a parent.
Yeah.
That is your responsibility as a mother or father.
And I know I don't want to stay too long on this, but parents need to know the weight of that.
100%.
Like, I think that I mean, I'm a 55 days-ish to being a dad, to meeting Selah. And what I realized is being a parent is one of the most important things I'll ever do. And I don't think I realized that. But the more I read, the closer we're getting to meeting her, like, I just realized, like, yo, I will be one of the biggest influences in her life.
Yep.
Like, I think we forget that. Like, your kids right now, like, when they're young, they're going to look up to you and all these things. But it's crazy. I did a sermon on prayer, and as I was doing research, I was just asking young adults, like, hey, who taught you how to pray?
Yeah, I remember you saying this.
Yeah. And can you believe, I don't think any of them told me their parents.
Yeah.
That's crazy, James.
Yeah, we got to change that, man.
That has to change.
Yep.
You know, that has to change.
Yeah.
And it changes with us being more intentional.
Yeah.
Don't leave church and not do anything at home. Read your Bible on Monday, man. You know, and be like, take initiative of it. Like, just be intentional with your kids, because it's gonna matter. It will change their life if they can know the King of Kings early on in life.
That's right. Yep.
You know? Everybody always asks me, like, I always ask this question: if you could do something, if you could change anything, what would it be? And one of the things I always say is, I wish I would have followed Jesus earlier.
Yeah.
I just wish that would have, like, I wish I would have done that.
Save yourself from a lot of pain and heartache, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
So, but all right, let's talk about a new family. So, and you talked about just the biblical relationship with in-laws and even with your parents look like after marriage. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, going back to what I said over the weekend, you know, when a man and a woman get married, a new family is formed. And this is such an important concept, okay, that when a man marries a woman, he doesn't marry into her family. And when a woman marries a man, she doesn't marry into his family, but that they start a new family. And so what that means is that they come out from under the covering of their parents, okay? That they take steps away from parental control and parental provision, and that they start a new family, and now this husband and wife is meant to do for their new family what was done for them as part of their old families, if that makes sense. So it's like these two people that came from those one flesh relationships leave those one flesh relationships, and now they become one flesh together. So this new family is formed. Now, I would say there still needs to be honor and respect there.
Yeah.
for the parents that you are leaving behind, okay? So that doesn't change with adult children. Adult children still need to honor and respect mom and dad, but honoring and respecting doesn't mean that the adult child still has to obey and submit in all things. And I would just say this to parents too. This is why you got to remember, man, you're raising adults, okay? You're not raising kids, you're raising adults. And so in your parenting, you got to always be thinking that way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to raise a human being who will one day leave me
That's good.
and live on their own and make wise decisions for the glory of God and the good of the world. And so the hope of every parent should be that they would honor and respect me without needing to obey and submit to me, okay? And so, again, adult kids, honor and respect, yes, but now you're out on your own, and you're having to make your own decisions, and those decisions, in a sense, impact your own family now. But all that to say this, when new families are formed, that husband and wife are now responsible, again, to do for their family what was once done for them. So they've got to provide for the members of their family. They've got to leave behind inheritance for generations after them. They've got to educate children, as we just talked about. We'll talk about caring for aging parents here in just a moment. But practically, it means that this new family has to make decisions that are right and best for their family, which means that those decisions might look different from decisions that in-laws might want them to make or parents might want them to make.
Yeah.
Let me get way down in the weeds, okay? So let's say you grew up in a family and you always did your vacation, your family vacation at the beach every summer. But you get married and your new family, y'all decide, we're going to do our family vacation in the mountains. Well, it might be that your in-laws or parents are hacked off about that. Well, we've always done it this way, and I thought you guys were going to come and vacation with us and stay at the place. And here's the deal, man. Like, you are free to make that decision for your new family. And to all the parents and in-laws listening, you have to understand that you got to let go of that, okay? They do not have to agree to the decisions that have always been made because that's their family now. So you got to be humble enough to let go of that and to say, you know what? They can decide. And yeah, this is the way we've always done it, but that doesn't mean they got to keep doing it this way because that's their family. I would say the same with holiday traditions. All right, I'll give you a real life example.
Yeah.
My family that I grew up in, on Christmas, we would always get up like super, super early, like 7 a.m. early, 6 a.m. early. We'd be at the door by 7 a.m. We get up super early, open presents, get ready real quick, run out the door, go to the grandparents. And we would like hit 2 separate grandparents' houses. And so we'd go to one for breakfast and spend time there, another for lunch, spend time there. Long day, exhausting day, fun day. But, early on in the life of my new family, when Amber and I got married, we were still trying to kind of like keep that rhythm, And then we had kids. And the whole dynamic of the family changed.
Yeah.
And I remember the first couple years with kids, it was like get up super early, open presents, get ready real quick, run out the door, gone all day. And man, after doing it for like a year or two, we were like, I don't know that this works for our family. And so we just decided, hey, what we're going to do as a family, because this is our family, is that we're going to wake up whenever we wake up, and we're going to open presents and drink coffee and eat sausage balls for the glory of God, and we're going to relax and hang out. And we're only going to go to one of our families on Christmas Day. And then the other family, we're going to get together with them on a different day. And we had to have the conversation with our families about that, like, hey, this is what we're going to do as a family. And we just had to ask for some grace and some flexibility there. But again, all that to say, like, in-laws and parents, just at some point, they got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, they got to be humble enough to let it all go and to agree, okay, this is the way our family did it, but that doesn't mean that your family has to do it that way now. And if you want to make different decisions for your family, it's your right to make those decisions. And so the hard thing is when parents and in-laws don't understand that and they see no separation of the families.
Yeah.
And what they see is like, oh, no, you did marry into our family, and because you're a part of our family now, you've got to do it this way. And I would just lovingly remind all the in-laws who are listening, you're wrong. And I love you enough to tell you that you're wrong. That's their family. It's a new family. It's not your family anymore. So you got to let it go.
Yeah. You heard it here first, okay? You're wrong. So Get off her back. I'm just playing. No, I got great in-laws, so I can't complain.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's good. I don't think it's crazy that we really don't learn this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I wish we could, but nobody teaching it, you know? So I think it's good to know that, you started a new family and, you know, you're in charge of it. So
That's right.
Understand that. So that's good. But let's talk about aging parents.
Okay.
So, and caring for them. I'm not going to lie. It was just an awesome part of the message when you said this. Because I know people who are taking care of aging parents. I mean, my mom is one taking care of her mother.
Right.
And I think that people forget about them.
Oh, 100%.
And I love the fact that you just said that this is a responsibility of the new family to provide and care for. But I just thought it was amazing. And I know the people who are taking care of aging parents right now, man, they were like, oh, they see me.
Yeah.
You know, so that was cool.
Yep. Well, I think it's a huge question, and I know it's one that a lot of people have other questions about. And the truth is, I only talked about it for maybe a minute or two in the sermon. But I was driving into a dinner here at church last night that I was a part of, and on the way I was talking to some good friends of mine, and we were talking about this question because they're there right now. This is where they are in life, man. Is they're both having to care for aging parents.
Yeah,
and like, what does this look like practically? And so we were having a great conversation. But I'll just repeat some of the things that I said to them on our phone call. You know, I said I think it depends. I think it depends on the family. It depends on the family dynamic. I think part of it might even depend on geography. There are a lot of nuances to this that have to be taken into consideration. But a couple of the questions that I would put before people. Number one, when you're caring for aging parents, I think you have to ask the question, what level of care do they require? Because the truth is there are some parents who are aging who have certain limitations or certain needs that certain medical professions need to help, or medical professionals need to help meet. So I think about my grandfather, for example. My grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he was put into a facility at some point. Like there just came a point where the family couldn't care for him any longer because what he needed is care around the clock. And then there was a point, too, where physically he was so limited that he needed the help of nurses and medical care professionals to come and to care for him in certain ways. And so what the care looked like, and the family was responsible for this, but what the care looked like was we need to put him in a facility where he can receive the full-time care that is needed. And so I think, again, that requires wisdom. It requires discernment to know as family members, what does care need to look like based on their needs and based on their limitations and based on what they're experiencing physically and medically? So I think some of those questions need to be asked.
Yeah.
Another question I would ask, though, is this, and this is where it gets really complex and messy, okay? Part of deciding how to care for aging parents, I think you've also got to ask the question, what level of care did they provide as parents? Okay. What I mean by that, I know people who have had to establish boundaries with parents because of trauma, abuse, neglect, addiction, all sorts of things, that because the parent failed to be a parent and did not do for the child what parents are intended to do for children, now as the parent ages and gets older and they need care, but there are boundaries there in the relationship, healthy boundaries, to protect not only the adult child, but also the family of the adult child, because there are certain boundaries that are in place that may impact the type of care that is offered, okay? And here's what I would say to the person, and this is where it gets so hard. Like, if that's your story, you still have a responsibility to obey God in this. This is hard. So you're like, oh no, you telling me that if my parent did X, Y, and Z to me and I still have to care for him in some way? I would say I think as a child, biblically speaking, that part of your responsibility is to figure out how to care for your aging parent. And again, I know it's hard, but this is one of the ways that you can honor God and that you can bear the image of God rightly in the world by treating your parent who failed you as an image bearer. As a human being who still, despite all of their sin and shortcomings, possesses intrinsic dignity and value and worth, And you never know how God might use that to put his glory on display, not only before them, but also other people. But, I think in many cases, the care that you provide has to be on your terms and not on their terms, okay? Mm-hmm. So let me say it like this. It may not mean that you bring them into your home. If there are boundaries that are in place there that would prevent that, let's say, again, the addiction's still present, you got kids. You can't bring some addicted person into your house, put them around your kids, man. And this is why it's so tricky. And this is why when sin impacts families, things get harder.
Yeah.
Because it makes stuff like this so complex, right? And so if there are certain boundaries that are in place, it may not be, I got to bring them in my home and give them a bedroom and pay for all their stuff, or give them money because they might waste the money on things that are going to be damaging them or whatever. But it may be that you go to that aging parent and you're like, I want to care for you. Mm-hmm. And here's the type of care that I'm willing to provide for you, right? I'll give money to the place that you can go live in and you can get the support and care you need. Or, hey man, I'll if you need a place to go, I'll help to get you here. And you know what I'm saying? Like, it may just need to take on a different form than other families, because other families might be healthy when yours are not. Mm-hmm. And with healthy families, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
With a healthy family, it's like, yeah, here's the bedroom, come live with us, and we'll help take care of needs. And with families that don't function according to God's ideal for families, this is tricky. But again, I would say as children, you still are responsible for obeying God in your role as a child. So
yeah,
it's hard.
It is hard. And I had a question. So like, let's say somebody's going through that right now.
Yeah.
And they just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, what would you tell them? Like, to talk to other people? You know, there's probably like some stuff that what would they do?
Yeah. Well, I think that they could do what my friends did. You know, reach out, set up a meeting with a pastor, get some biblical advice or counsel, at the very least a spiritual mentor, a mature believer in Christ.
Yeah.
And really sort and talk through this. I would say don't try to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
You know?
That's good.
Like go seek wise counsel.
I like that.
And be very, very prayerful. And I think with the help of the Holy Spirit and with the help of God's people, you can figure it out.
Yeah. So don't do it alone.
Don't do it alone.
No, that's beautiful. All right, we got 2 more things to talk about. So I don't even know the time, but let's try
We'll plow through it, man.
Let's try to get through it. So let's talk marriage.
Okay.
One man, one woman for life. I know you talked a little bit about different views, the Christian worldview and the humanistic worldview. So let's just talk about that.
All right. Yeah, this again is where our Christian worldview would differ from the dominant worldview of our day, which is the humanistic worldview. Mm-hmm. And what I taught over the weekend is that when it comes to marriage in particular, like as Christians, we believe that marriage is creational. Mm-hmm. So God created it, he owns it, it belongs to him, and because it belongs to him, we can't do what we want with it, okay? But that, as you just said, the biblical definition for marriage, it is a covenant between one man and one woman for life. That's what it is, okay? Again, Christianity would say we can't expand that or change that or redefine it. God created it, he defined it, he determined it, and that is what it is, okay? On the other hand, the humanistic worldview would say that marriage is a social construct, and that because human beings constructed it, that human beings are free to deconstruct it and redefine it and expand it. And again, what we know is that in our society today, this is what we have done. Mm-hmm. We have changed the definition of marriage to accommodate people who would not be or would not fall into one man, one woman for life, right? I mean, we've redefined marriage to include men marrying men, women marrying women. So marriage has been expanded, and it now goes beyond what we would say is the biblical definition of marriage. And I believe that one of the primary reasons that we have done this as a society is because of the reality of same-sex attraction, okay? Mm-hmm. And I just thought we could speak to that briefly on the podcast today, because I know this is a real thing for people, okay?
It is.
I have friends and family members who, for their entire lives, as long as they can remember, would say they have been attracted to the same sex. Mm-hmm. I have friends who are pastors who would say that for as long as they can remember, they have been attracted to the same sex. Now, I'll get to their response in just a moment to those same-sex attractions, okay? But all that to say, and I've said this on the podcast last week when we talked about gender, I know for a lot of people, those feelings and those attractions are very real. So I'm not trying to say that they're not real.
Yeah.
But according to the Christian worldview, they are real and present because of what we see in Genesis chapter 3, and it is the fall, okay?
Yeah.
The way that I typically talk about this, because sin is with us and we all have sin natures, we all now possess disordered desires. And these are desires that are constantly drawing us away from God towards sin. The Bible talks about this as our flesh. And so, Carlos, what's true for you and me is that we have desires in us that are not of God and cause us to bend toward autonomy. I just want to do life my way and not God's way. And what we would say as Christians, not because we hate people or because we're trying to condemn people, but what we would say as Christians is that same-sex desires are disordered desires. That the mistake that people make is thinking, well, no, these are ordered and good desires that God gave me. And we would say, no, these are disordered desires that are present in you because of the fall and the sinful nature of man. And when it comes to all of our disordered desires, like the reality is, bro, we're all sexually broken in certain ways.
Yeah.
Whether it's someone's attraction to the same sex, it's someone's bent to look at pornography, it's someone's bent toward lust and adultery. I mean, whatever it may be, we are all sexually broken in some way. We all have disordered desires in a sexual sense. And what we all have to decide each and every day is, will we give in to those desires or will we not, okay? Guy that I know, Sam Alberry. He's a pastor, just incredible guy, man. We've had him in here at Cross Point to do a forum on this topic. He wrote a book called Is God Anti-Gay? Great resource if you want to learn more about this. Same-sex attracted pastor who is living a life of celibacy because he believes that the desires that live in him are disordered desires. They are not honoring to God. In the end, they do not lead to his flourishing. And he believes what the Bible teaches about marriage and human sexuality, that marriage, by definition, is one man, one woman for life, and that only men and women should have sex within the bounds of marriage. And so here's Sam Alberry saying, this is the desire I have to put to death. And I love what I've heard Sam say, that the gospel levels the playing field, okay? That when Jesus calls someone to follow him, it is a call to die to self, that you deny yourself, you take up your cross, you follow Jesus. And what I've heard Sam say is, I have to deny myself in this.
Yeah.
I can't indulge this, but I have to deny myself in this, just like every follower of Jesus Christ has to deny themselves in something.
Yeah.
The gospel levels the playing field in that way. And so the difficulty, though, and this again is where, man, it gets so personal. And again, there are people that I love deeply that I know struggle with this. And this is where the conversation gets so hard. Like, what we would say as Christians is that the only way to be faithful to Christ as someone who might struggle with same-sex attraction is that you do take a step toward biblical marriage despite those attractions, or that you do what my friend Sam has done and you choose a life of celibacy, believing that the way of Christ is better, and then the church has to again serve as the family, which is why we need strong churches.
Yeah.
It's why churches have to take this idea of family so seriously, because we have to fill in the gaps for people who, out of faithfulness to Christ, would say, my relationship with him is more important than even a marriage relationship. That my faithfulness to him is more important than me giving into a same-sex attraction. The church has to be the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, the family that person needs as they walk out their faith and they battle against their flesh. And so it is so hard. It is so complex, man, but there are some great resources out there. Sam Alberry is a great one. Rebecca McLaughlin is a great one. Jackie Hill Perry is a great one. There are a lot of people, man, who are leading voices in this conversation within the world of Christianity that deal with this, but are walking in obedience to Christ each and every day. So if that's your story, I would say go hunt down some of their resources and check them out. I pray that they're helpful for you. And if we can serve you as a church, we love you. You don't have to have it all figured out. We're here, and we'd love to serve you any way we can.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I think that if you are the person that's trying to like, how do I talk to somebody too? I think you should read up on these resources 100%. As well. Because I think the last thing you want to do is go about it the wrong way. Yeah. And I think a lot of people just want behaviors to change when that's not the goal. Correct. Heart change is the goal. That's I love that in Sam Alberry's book, Is God Anti-Gay? He says like we need to, it's from the inside out that we need to work in.
That's exactly right.
And what's the gospel has a house key? Yeah. And she said that she changed, her whole life changed because people invited her in and loved her where she was.
Rosaria Butterfield.
Yeah, Rosaria Butterfield.
She's another one. Yeah.
So there's just a lot of resources out there that you can equip yourself and really learn how to go about these relationships, because we all know this. We all, like you just said it, you have people in your life that are struggling with same-sex attraction. So learning how to talk about these things and also in a gospel-centered way. I think so many people have been hurt by the church because we just don't know how to talk about these things. And we're like angry when we talk about them. Right. When we should approach it, like you said, every other sin, because it's a sin. Yeah. And so I just think equipping yourself to be able to talk to it, and then it would be just beneficial for you, for the church. I mean, for so many different people. Well,
and at the end of the day, it is a matter of flourishing. Mm-hmm. What will cause a person to flourish and a family to flourish? And at the end of the day, only one worldview can be right, right?
Yeah.
And so it's either God's way or it's the way of the humanistic worldview. They can't both be right because we can't synthesize the worldviews. And again, out of love for people and care for people, what we're saying is God's way is right.
Yeah.
And he designed marriage, and it belongs to him, and the family is his. And if you want to know true human flourishing as an individual or within the family, your only choice, man, is to do it in the way that God created it to work, to conform to creation, to live according to your nature. Because if you do it another way,
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work. So anyway, but I don't know, man. That's been a lot. Maybe we should just button it up there.
Yeah, we could.
Save the rest for another podcast.
Hey, sounds good to me.
Does that sound good, man? Okay.
Yeah. So, hey, we want to just tell you guys, I know we're talking about a lot of difficult things, but I think you just said it, we need strong churches. And we're not going to be strong because we just put a good gathering together. It's because we lean on truth, man. We stand on it and we teach truth. And so I'm just glad that we're doing this. So thank you guys for listening. We just wanted you to know that we love you. We're here for you, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Pursuit with James Griffin. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll never miss an episode. If you have questions about the message, the scriptures, or faith in general, you can send them to us by texting the word question to the number 22722. For more information about our church or this podcast, please visit crosspointcity.com or follow us online at Crosspoint City. If you found value in this podcast, we would love it if you took time to like it and share it with a friend. Doing that will help more people know and follow Jesus. And finally, we want to invite you to join us each week for one of our gatherings in person or live on YouTube. We hope to see you soon.